Sometimes, your own blood will value your money more than your life. And when greed takes root in a family, love and loyalty vanish faster than you'd believe. My name is Thad Kinsley, I'm 74 years old, and this is the story of how I pretended to be dead for 6 months just to see what my children would do with my so-called inheritance. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and let me know where and which time you're watching this story in the comments below. I always enjoy reading your responses. I worked my whole life as a machinist in a small town in Pennsylvania. 50 years at the same factory, starting when I was just 18 years old. My hands are still stained with oil and metal shavings from decades of honest work. After my wife Sarah passed from cancer when the kids were young, I raised 3 children alone. Worked double shifts, missed sleep, gave up my dreams so they could have theirs. I thought I raised them with values of honesty and respect. Boy, was I wrong. It was a cold October night when everything changed. I had gone to bed early, tired from a day of fixing my neighbor's fence, but came back downstairs around midnight for my heart medicine. The doctor had me on 3 different pills, and I couldn't afford to miss a dose. That's when I heard voices from my living room. Low whispers, but in a quiet house at midnight, whispers carry. I stood in the dark hallway and listened to my 3 children, all grown adults in their 40s and 50s, talking about me like I was already 6 feet under. Dad's got at least $200,000 in savings, my eldest son Garrick said, shuffling through papers. I found his bank statements on his desk. Plus this house is worth maybe $250, and the 20 acres behind it could be worth another $100,000. We're looking at maybe $500,000 total, split 3 ways. My daughter Lorraine actually laughed. It was a cold, calculated sound I'd never heard from her before. I already picked out new furniture for this place when we rented it out. That old couch has got to go, and those awful curtains Mom made. Everything in here screams 1980. But it was my youngest, Micah, who broke my heart into pieces. Honestly, he's lived too long already. Most guys his age are already gone. He's what, 74? My friend's dad died at 68, and he was healthier than the old man. They kept talking for another hour. Planning my funeral, dividing my belongings, even discussing which funeral home would be cheapest. I stood there in that dark hallway, feeling like I was already dead. I stood there in the dark hallway until almost 2 in the morning, listening to my own children plan my funeral like it was a business meeting. They divided up my land, my savings, even my tools. Garrick wanted to sell my workshop before the funeral, said the equipment would lose value if it sat too long. Lorraine planned to rent out my house to college students from the nearby university. Micah just wanted his cut in cash so he could pay off his gambling debts. When they finally left, I sat in my kitchen until sunrise, drinking coffee and staring at pictures of them as children. Little Garrick building model planes with me in the garage. Lorraine helped her mother bake cookies for the church sale. Micah learned to ride his bike while I held the back of his seat, running alongside him. Where had I gone wrong? How had those sweet children turned into adults who couldn't wait for me to die? That morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my old army buddy Cliff Murdoch. We served together in Vietnam back in '68, and he was the only person I could trust with what I was about to do. Cliff lived about 40 miles away, but he'd always told me to call if I needed anything. Cliff, I said when he answered the phone, how would you like to help me stage my own death? There was a long pause. Then Cliff started laughing. Thad, you crazy old fool, what are you planning? Cliff didn't ask many questions. That's what I always liked about him. He just listened while I explained everything I had overheard, and by the end of my story, he was as angry as I was. Those ungrateful kids, he muttered. After everything you did for them. Within a week, we had it all figured out. Cliff had connections from his years working at the VA hospital. His cousin Jimmy worked at the county morgue, and another friend named Pete could make fake documents that looked official. It wasn't cheap, the whole operation cost me $5,000, but it was worth every penny to learn the truth about my family. The plan was simple but had to be perfect. I would have a heart attack at Murphy's Market on a Tuesday morning when it wasn't too crowded. Cliff would be there shopping, acting as a witness. He'd call 911, and the ambulance would take me to County General Hospital. There, Dr. Martinez, who owed Cliff a favor from the war, would declare me dead from cardiac arrest. From there, Jimmy would handle the body switch at the morgue, and Pete would file the death certificate with the county. Meanwhile, I'd be hiding in Cliff's hunting cabin until I was ready to return from the dead. We practiced my heart attack 3 times in Cliff's backyard. I had to make it look real but not so real that someone would try CPR and figure out I was faking. The key was timing. I had to collapse right when Cliff was nearby but not make it look planned. On November 3rd, a cold Tuesday morning, I died in the frozen food section of Murphy's Market. I was reaching for a bag of peas when I grabbed my chest, made some choking sounds, and hit the floor. Oscar-worthy performance, if I do say so myself. Mrs. Patterson from down the street started screaming. Cliff came running from the cereal aisle, yelling for someone to call 911. The paramedics arrived in 4 minutes, loaded me onto a stretcher, and drove me to my fake death. 3 days later, I watched my own funeral from Cliff's truck, parked across the street from St. Mary's Church where Sarah and I were married 48 years ago. I expected to see tears, grief, maybe some genuine sadness for the men who raised them alone after their mother died. Instead, I saw my children checking their phones and whispering about property values. The service lasted exactly 22 minutes. I timed it. 22 minutes for a man who worked 50 years, raised 3 kids alone, coached Little League for 10 years, and volunteered at the food bank every Christmas. Father Murphy gave a generic speech about eternal rest and God's plan. He barely knew me, since my children never came to church with me anymore. Garrick gave a eulogy about how I was, finally at peace, and no longer suffering. What suffering? I was in better health than most men my age. Lorraine cried into a tissue, but I could see her checking her makeup in her phone camera between fake tears. Micah looked bored and kept checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. Only 12 people showed up. 12 people for a man who lived in the same town for 74 years. My neighbor Mrs. Henderson brought flowers from her garden, the same daisies Sarah used to love. She was the only one who seemed genuinely sad, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief her grandmother had made. Old Pete from the hardware store was there, and 3 guys from my machinist days who were still alive. The rest were just neighbors being polite. My own children had spent more time planning how to divide my money than they did planning my funeral. As I watched them lower my empty casket into the ground, I felt like I really was dead inside. Cliff had prepared everything perfectly. His hunting cabin sat deep in the woods about 5 miles from town, hidden by thick pine trees and accessible only by a dirt road that most people didn't know existed. The cabin had no electricity and no running water, just a wood stove for heat and a hand pump for well water. It wasn't comfortable, but comfort wasn't the point. I was about to get an education in who my children really were, and sometimes education comes with a price. Cliff brought me supplies every few days, food, batteries for my flashlight, and most importantly, the equipment I needed for surveillance. Military-grade binoculars from his army days, a camera with a telephoto lens that could take clear pictures from half a mile away, and a notebook to document everything I witnessed. From the cabin, I had a perfect view of my house and property through the trees. I could see my front door, my workshop, and most of my backyard. During the day, I would sit by the window and watch. At night, I would sneak closer to the house and take pictures with the camera's night vision feature. The first week was quiet. Too quiet. My children came and went, looking appropriately sad whenever neighbors were around. I started to think maybe I had judged them wrong. Maybe they were just processing their grief in private. Maybe that conversation I overheard was just them being practical about finances. I should have known better. Grief has a way of revealing people's true character, and greed has a way of making people forget their grief entirely. By the second week, the vultures started circling. By the second week, they were circling my house like vultures. I watched through binoculars as Garrick walked around my property with a real estate agent. They were already measuring for a for sale sign. Lorraine showed up with a truck and started loading my furniture. My favorite chair, the one I sat in every evening for 20 years, was the first to go. She didn't even wait for the will to be read. Micah was the worst. He found my spare key under the flower pot and started bringing friends over. They were drinking my beer, eating my food, and treating my home like their personal party house. I took pictures of everything. Every theft, every betrayal, every moment of disrespect. My camera became my best friend. Here's the thing about my death that my children didn't know: legally, I wasn't actually dead. The fake death certificate was just for show, filed in a way that wouldn't hold up to serious legal scrutiny. My real will was still locked up with my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, who was in on the plan from the beginning. Peterson had been my lawyer for 20 years, ever since Sarah died and I needed help with her estate. He was an honest man who genuinely cared about his clients, not just their money. When I told him what I had overheard and what I was planning, he was shocked but agreed to help. "Thad," he said, "in 40 years of practicing law, I've seen families destroy themselves over money. But your own children wishing for your death. That's a new low." But my children didn't know any of this. They thought they could just divide everything up between themselves without any legal process. They figured small-town probate courts move slowly, and by the time anyone asked questions, they'd have everything sold and the money spent. That's when Garrick made his first big mistake. He went to my bank with a forged copy of my death certificate and tried to access my checking account. The bank manager, Susan Walsh, had known me for 15 years. She called Peterson to verify the death certificate, and Peterson told her to stall while he investigated. Meanwhile, my children started fighting among themselves over who got what. The family I thought I had raised was falling apart over money they didn't even legally own yet. And I was documenting every betrayal, every lie, every moment of greed with my camera. The fights between my children got worse every day. I watched from the woods as Garrick and Micah almost came to blows over my workshop tools. Lorraine changed the locks on my house to keep her brothers out, which led to Micah breaking a window to get inside. They stopped talking to each other except to argue. Garrick hired a lawyer to try to claim the biggest share of the inheritance. Lorraine started selling my belongings online. Micah just kept partying in my house with his no-good friends. 3 siblings who used to play together as children couldn't even look at each other without fighting. Greed had poisoned everything between them. In month 3 of my death, I discovered something that shocked me more than anything else. Garrick had a girlfriend named Stella, and she was now living in my house with him. Not only that, but she was pregnant. This was the son who told everyone he was too busy with work to visit his old dad more than once a month. But he had time for a secret girlfriend and a baby on the way. He never told me about either one. Stella seemed nice enough, but she was making herself comfortable in my home like she owned the place. She even planted new flowers in my wife's garden. That hurt more than I expected. Lorraine turned out to be the greediest and most calculating of all my children. While her brothers fought over tools and furniture like children squabbling over toys, she was quietly stealing the most valuable things I owned. My wife's jewelry, my coin collection that took 30 years to build, even my father's Purple Heart and Bronze Star from World War II. I followed her to 3 different pawn shops over 2 weeks, watching through my camera lens as she sold pieces of our family history for quick cash. She sold my wife's wedding ring, the ring I saved for 6 months to buy when we got engaged, to Sal's pawn shop for $300. That ring was worth at least $3,000, but she didn't care about value. She just wanted money in her pocket. The worst part was watching her lie to the pawn shop owners. She told Sal that I had left the ring to her specifically, that it was her inheritance from her beloved father. She even fake cried while telling the story, dabbing at her eyes with the same tissue technique she used at my funeral. But it was my father's war medals that really broke my heart. Those medals represented my father's service in the Pacific Theater, his sacrifice for his country. He died when I was 12, and those medals were the only thing I had left of him. Lorraine sold them to a collector for $800, probably not even knowing what battles they represented or why they mattered. I took pictures of every transaction, got receipts from trash cans, even recorded some conversations when I could get close enough. Lorraine thought she was being smart, but she was actually creating a perfect paper trail of her own theft. Micah turned my family home into something I barely recognized. Every weekend, and sometimes on weekdays too, groups of 20-somethings would show up with cases of beer and bottles of liquor. These weren't his childhood friends or people from our community. These were strangers who treated my house like a free hotel and entertainment center. My neighbors started complaining to the police about the noise, but there wasn't much they could do. Technically, Micah had a right to be in the house as my son, even if he didn't legally own it yet. Mrs. Henderson called me 3 times before remembering I was supposed to be dead. One Saturday night in December, I snuck up close to the house and watched through the windows. What I saw made me sick to my stomach. They had turned my living room into a poker game, betting money on my coffee table, the same table where Sarah and I used to do crossword puzzles together on Sunday mornings. Someone had thrown up on the carpet in the hallway, and instead of cleaning it up, they just put a towel over it. There were cigarette burns on my kitchen counter, beer stains on the couch where I used to read bedtime stories to my children, and holes punched in the wall from some kind of fight. But the worst moment came when I saw one of Micah's friends wearing my old army jacket, the one I wore during training at Fort Benning in 1967. This kid, who couldn't have been more than 25, was using my military jacket as a costume while he told jokes about old soldiers and dead veterans. I had to walk away before I did something that would blow my cover. That jacket represented 2 years of my life serving my country, and now it was a party prop for someone who probably couldn't find Vietnam on a map. In month 4, I discovered something that changed everything. While watching the house through binoculars, I saw a strange car in my driveway. A man in an expensive suit was talking to all 3 of my children. I found out later that this man was a developer who wanted to buy my land to build a shopping mall. My children were already negotiating to sell everything, even though they didn't legally own it yet. The deal was for $1.2 million. They were planning to split it 3 ways and never look back. My home, my workshop, my wife's garden, all of it would be destroyed for a parking lot. That's when I knew it was time to come back from the dead. On April 15th, exactly 6 months after my death, I walked up to my own front door and rang the bell. I had spent the morning getting ready for this moment, showering at Cliff's cabin with water heated over the wood stove, putting on my best suit, and practicing what I was going to say. The house looked different from the outside. The paint was peeling in places, the gutters were clogged with leaves, and someone had left beer bottles on the front porch. This wasn't the well-maintained home I had left 6 months ago. Lorraine answered the door, and I'll never forget the look on her face. First confusion, like she was trying to place who I was. Then recognition. Then absolute terror. She went white as a ghost, her eyes rolled back in her head, and she dropped the coffee cup she was holding. It shattered on the hardwood floor I had installed myself 20 years ago. "Hello, daughter," I said calmly, stepping over the broken pieces. "We need to talk." She screamed so loud that both her brothers came running from different parts of the house. Garrick appeared first, coming down the stairs while tucking in his shirt. When he saw me standing there alive in my own living room, he grabbed the banister and fainted right on the spot. Just crumpled like a rag doll and hit the floor. Micah came stumbling out of the kitchen, still half drunk from whatever party he'd had the night before. He just stood there with his mouth open like a fish out of water, making these strange choking sounds like he couldn't get air into his lungs. "Sit down," I told them, gesturing to the couch that was now stained with beer and God knows what else. "All of you. We have 6 months' worth of catching up to do." I sat them down in my own living room and pulled out 6 months' worth of photographs. Pictures of them stealing my belongings, forging my signature, partying in my house, and planning to sell my land to developers. "I know about everything," I told them. "Every theft, every lie, every moment of disrespect. I've been watching you for 6 months, and I've documented it all." Garrick tried to make excuses. Lorraine started crying real tears this time. Micah just looked angry, like I had somehow wronged him by coming back to life. "The question now," I said, "is what we're going to do about it. Here's what I did with my newfound knowledge of my children's true character. First, I had them all arrested for theft and fraud. The police were very interested in my photographs and documentation. Second, I changed my will completely. Instead of leaving everything to my 3 children, I left it all to charity. The local animal shelter, TLD it to the county for a nature preserve, making sure it could never be developed. My children got nothing. Not 1 penny. Some people might think what I did was too harsh. Maybe it was. But when your own children wish for your death and celebrate your passing like it's Christmas morning, sometimes harsh is exactly what they deserve. When they steal from you, lie about you, and destroy everything you built with your bare hands, sometimes justice needs to have teeth. My children have tried to contact me dozens of times since that day. Letters, phone calls, emails, even showing up at places where they think I might be. But it's too late for apologies and explanations. They showed me who they really are when they thought no one was watching, and that's a truth you can't take back or explain away. Garrick sent me a 20-page letter trying to justify everything he did. He blamed stress from his job, pressure from Stella about the baby, and claimed he was just planning ahead for my eventual passing. 20 pages of excuses, but not one word of genuine remorse. Lorraine hired a lawyer and tried to contest my new will, claiming I wasn't mentally competent when I changed it. That backfired spectacularly when Mr. Peterson produced 6 months of documentation showing I had been perfectly lucid and methodical in my planning. Her case was thrown out of court in less than a week. Micah was the most persistent. He tracked me down in Florida 3 months after I moved, showing up at my condo complex drunk and demanding his fair share of what he called the family money. Security called the police, and he spent the night in a Sarasota jail cell. That was the last time I saw any of them. I moved to a small town outside Tampa with the money from selling my property. I bought a modest condo 2 blocks from the beach and started volunteering at the local animal shelter. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I'm surrounded by creatures who appreciate kindness and don't judge you by what's in your bank account. The dogs at the shelter don't care that I'm 74 or that I have arthritis in my hands. They just want someone to throw a tennis ball and scratch behind their ears. It's a simple kind of love, uncomplicated by greed or expectations. Sometimes I wish I had learned that lesson sooner. Thanks for watching my story, and remember, treat your family with love and respect while you have the chance. But also remember that family isn't always about blood, and blood doesn't always make you family. Sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one, and let me know in the comments what you think about my 6-month journey from the grave. Have you ever discovered something about your family that changed everything? Share your stories below. I read every single comment. Until next time, this is Thad Kinsley, reminding you that sometimes the dead really can come back to get their revenge, and sometimes that revenge is exactly what the living deserve. *.